even though things are not in the exact state where we would like to be. But having this precious human life with such a mind, powerful mind, if we can utilize it properly, we can achieve much more greater and higher purpose and meaning in our life. And this human life is the best life in order to practice the Dharma. Therefore, we must utilize it properly and not waste it. Use this life to practice the Dharma. Not only we need to practice Dharma, we need to practice now, before the death comes. And since we don't know when it will come, without postponing, we should try to practice immediately as much as possible. And the purpose of practicing the Dharma is to be more help, more beneficial to others, as well as overcoming our own delusions, which are the cause of our own problems, suffering. And in order to overcome those defilement delusions, so that we can find more, so we can be more benefit to others as well as find more peace in ourselves. We need to reflect, contemplate, meditate, and practice. To do that, we need to be reminded of the practices all the time. For that very reason that I'm going to listen to the teachings. And may our act of listening to the teaching become cause and conditions to actualize and to obtain our highest potential fully, awakened state. For the highest benefit and greatest benefit of all sentient beings. Sangye Chodanzo Yezo Nama Chanju Pato Dani Chansu Chi Lagi Choje Kipe Sonam Dola Benje Sangye Doba Sangye Chodanzo Yezo Nama chanchu padu dani kyatsu lagi Geshe gibe sonam dola penche sangye dupa sangye chodan soge sonam la chanchu padu dani kyatsu lagi Geshe gibe sonam dola penche sangye dupa Anje de ni zo ne ta ren de ba me de ta de sun de de bo dam de la cha so mo As mentioned yesterday, even though each of us and all sentient beings wish to be happy and do not desire suffering even for a moment, but the reality, the fact is at the moment we continue to experience problem, conflict and sufferings on many different levels. And we continue to struggle to find true inner peace, lasting inner peace, joy and happiness. And the reason why we struggle to find that true peace and happiness and why we continue to experience suffering is because of due to our own defilement, afflicted emotions, due to our own mind. As long as we have those defilements, those negative minds, we struggle to find true inner peace, happiness. We'll continue to experience suffering and problems. And as long as we have the, fundamental ignorance of self-grasping and selfish attitude, then those delusions continue to manifest when cause and condition come together. So, in order to overcome all the problems, suffering permanently, and to find really lasting peace and happiness, then we need to overcome the selfish attitude and the self-grasping ignorance. And to do that, we need to develop the conventional bodhicitta that can encounter the selfish attitude, and ultimate bodhicitta that can counter the self-grasping ignorance, and thereby liberating ourselves from the very root of all the delusions and the root of all the suffering and pain, and thereby finding lasting true inner peace and happiness, ultimate happiness. By doing that, then also we develop the best qualities, tools, means, skillful means and power and quality to be much more greater benefit and help to each and every sentient beings. And so therefore here the text that we are going to be discussing explain much on that, in that two subject, and mostly on conventional bodhicitta, dealing with that. Also, all our delusions are rooted in the fundamental ignorance, and the fundamental ignorance is totally mistaken. mind. So therefore, when we have the wisdom that realizes the truth, that can overcome that mistaken mind of ignorance, and when we overcome that ignorance, and we can overcome all the delusion that arises due to that ignorance. And through the help of the bodhicitta mind, the conventional bodhicitta mind, not only we can overcome the delusion, but also imprint led by the delusion, the subtle obscurations. And through that, then we can actualize our highest potential, the fully awakened state. The state which is free from all the obscurations, all the faults, all the negativities, and state which has actualized all the positive qualities. In highest level of wisdom, compassion, and skillful means. And in order to achieve that state, then again we need the tools the path of cultivating the two bodhicitta mind. And so, in concerning that, then yesterday we spoke about in order to practice those two bodhicitta mind, then first we need to practice the foundation, the preliminary. And as I mentioned, the preliminary practice as the foundation for the practice of higher practice of true bodhicitta mind, as well as preliminary before each of sessions of our practice meditations. And again, starting with the breath, maybe 21 breath, to quiet your mind. And when your mind is more quiet, calm, cultivating good intention, motivation for the meditation practice. And then, especially we talk about, refuge bodhicitta and 17 practices, and then requesting for the blessing inspirations, and then on the basis of that, then engage in the actual meditation and practice. So that is the first among the 7 points. The first point is engage in the practice of preliminary, which we talked about yesterday. The second point is the actual practice on true bodhicitta. And when we talk about bodhicitta mind, conventional bodhicitta mind, as I mentioned yesterday, is out of great love and compassion, the wish to achieve your own highest potential, fully awakened state. That inspiration, that wish is the conventional bodhicitta mind. And ultimate bodhicitta mind is the wisdom that realizes the ultimate truth or reality directly, and which is supported by conventional bodhicitta mind. So, even though non-bodhisattvas, Arya and Arhat, even though they have the wisdom that realizes emptiness, the ultimate truth directly, but that is not the ultimate bodhicitta, because that wisdom is not supported by the conventional bodhicitta. So for the ultimate bodhicitta, when we talk about ultimate bodhicitta, we talk about the wisdom that realizes emptiness, which is supported by the conventional bodhicitta. Then that wisdom becomes much more powerful. Not only it can act as an antidote towards the defilement, the delusion, but it also can act as a antidote toward the subtle obscurations. The obscuration to omniscient, obscuration to knowledge, that obscure from being fully enlightened, fully awakened. And so, within the engage in the practice of bodhicitta, then here first starting with the ultimate bodhicitta, and then conventional bodhicitta. So as you can see, the actual practice, training the awakened mind, how to train in ultimate awakened mind of bodhicitta, and how to train in conventional awakened mind. So in terms of training, whether you train in the wisdom first or maybe the compassion, the conventional bodhicitta first, they are according to different scriptures, different. In some they explain the wisdom first and then the compassion and the bodhicitta later. In some the compassion and bodhicitta first and the wisdom later. And again, it's according to the disciples. It is said for the certain disciples, such as the Bodhisattva, who have a more sharp faculties. The wisdom is taught first, and they train in the wisdom first, and then they train in the conventional bodhicitta next. For those bodhisattvas who are less sharp, who have less sharp faculty, then they train in bodhicitta mind, conventional bodhicitta mind, then later they train in the wisdom. So it depends on individuals, Either way works for individuals. So however we feel more inclined individually. So is the text I have. The wisdom comes first, but here it comes conventional, so doesn't matter. So training the conventional awakened mind, in order to have the conventional bodhicitta, cultivate the conventional bodhicitta mind, we need to have cultivate a sense of dearness, closeness, kindness of other sentient beings. The more you feel dear of someone, closeness of someone, the more you feel kindness of them, the more it is easy for us to cultivate loving kindness and compassion. If you don't feel dearness of that person, if you don't feel closeness of that person, if you don't feel kindness of that person, then it is more difficult to cultivate loving kindness and compassion. It becomes. So in order to that, Um, so, meditating on kindness, dearness of other sentient beings help us to feel more connected, more close. And when you feel more connected, more close, then it's more easy to develop loving kindness, compassion. On the basis of loving kindness, compassion, then it becomes easy to cultivate the conventional awakening mind of bodhicitta. The stronger your compassion, the stronger your bodhicitta mind. So that is, and also one of the main interference, internal obstacles or interference from being able to cultivate true love, compassion, bodhicitta mind is our own selfish attitude. Our own selfish attitude. That selfish attitude, self-centeredness, is the main obstacles, main interference from us cultivating true love, compassion, bodhicitta mind. And we have to overcome that internal enemy, interference, obstacles. In order to overcome that, we need to understand how that selfish attitude is the very source of all our problem. The more you understand that, the more, not just intellectually, but experientially, as you reflect, contemplate, analyze with your own experience, the more you understand it is this selfish attitude which is the very root of all the suffering problem. Then the more you feel that you need to reduce, overcome it, the more you feel that, the more you will put effort to do that. The more you put more effort to reduce that selfish attitude, the more your mind becomes spacious and more moisture your mind to cultivate the plant of loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta mind. If there is less selfish attitude, then it is more easy to develop loving kindness, bodhicitta mind. If there is too much selfish attitude, then there is no space for the plant of loving kindness, compassion to grow. It's like your whole garden is taken over by a destructive, unwanted weeds, and so it doesn't allow the flower that you want to grow. So first, and so there here. And with all the meditations, there is the sessions, the actual session of meditation, and then post sessions. And so in the again, yeah. So in meditations, two things we meditate. One, reflecting, contemplating, meditating on the faults and disadvantage, shortcoming of the selfish attitude, by seeing that is the source of all the problems. and then reflecting, contemplating, meditating on the kindness of all other sentient beings. And so therefore here first it calls banish the one to blame for everything. So here every problem, all the conflict, all the suffering that we experience in our life, if there is any object to be blamed, then it's this selfish attitude. If we need any object to be blamed for the problem, for the conflict, for the suffering, if there is anything, then it is our selfish attitude. So here, when we train in the Lojong, mind training, instead of blaming others for things not going right in our life, encountering different obstacles, challenges on many different levels, instead of blaming outside, we blame this selfish attitude. Learning to blame the selfish attitude, and thereby then learning to reduce and overcome that selfish attitude. Trying to change the situations by changing your attitude. When you blame outside, someone else there, probably your problem, then you are in the mercy of someone and hope that they will change their attitude and their behavior. But when we recognize it is coming mainly from our own selfish attitude, then we take the charge. We take the responsibility and we take in charge of our life, our experiences. So instead of waiting for someone to change their attitude and behavior, we start to change our own attitude. And when we started to change our own attitude, our experience will change. Definitely our experience will change. Whether the other person changed their attitude or their behavior or not, but definitely by changing our own attitude, our experience will be different. Maybe it might not be able to change the external whatever discomfort immediately. If you have some health issue, maybe we might not be able to change that immediately just by having that attitude. Maybe if we are having some situations in our job, finance, maybe that will not immediately be changed by changing your attitude. But the suffering and the pain that we go through because of such challenges, obstacles, the suffering that emotionally that we go through that can be changed. We don't have to go through such a lot of emotional pain and suffering that arises due to certain changes in situations. And so if we can change our attitude, then definitely then we can change and of course in long term, definitely we purify previous negative karma by changing our attitude in that way, and we create positive karma, and therefore definitely in long term, then definitely we will also be able to change that. So it is again very radical way of thinking. Normally, immediately something goes wrong, we always point the finger outside, somewhere there. Here, when we practice the lojong, here he's saying, instead of pointing outside, look inside. Check inside. And the primary cause of all that is our own selfish attitude. So if there is something to blame, then it is that is the selfish attitude that is to be blamed. Of course, if we talk from a karmic point of view, what we are experiencing, unpleasantness or pleasant, is due to our own karma, our actions. And if we are experiencing unpleasant experiences, it's due to our own negative karma. And our negative karma is created due to selfish attitude. And those external factors are those are not the main primary cause of the problem. They are just a secondary cause. The primary cause is our own karmic potential, karmic imprint that have been manifested, and which is created due to selfish attitude. From karmic point of view, so that's how selfish attitudes create that cause. And even in our immediately, as it will come later, if you have less selfish attitude, even though there might be a physical discomfort, even though things are not going externally the way you would like things to go, in many different. But still, if you have less selfish attitude, you will suffer less emotionally. The more selfish attitude, then you suffer more emotionally due to those situations. And so that is for example, if I'm suffering due to someone's unpleasant behavior, unkind behavior, the reason I'm suffering is because of my own mind. Because my own mind. So instead of blaming the others for our own suffering, if we started to work with our own mind, then we don't have to suffer that due to that person's unkind, mean behavior. While we might not agree with that, and while we might take actions to stop that, but we don't have to suffer so much. And when we suffer, then we become again more prone to become a more negative. Easy for us to become a negative when we are suffering. So by that understanding how this selfish attitude is the one which is the cause of every problem, every suffering, every conflict. With that understanding, then we try to vanish, we try to reduce and overcome that selfish attitude. And so that we try to do that in our meditations, as well as when you are outside of meditation in our everyday life, when something we learn when something goes wrong, instead of blaming immediately, we try to look inside and then blame the selfish attitude. It requires a lot of practice because, we have this strong imprint of pointing the finger outside all the time when something goes wrong, all the time. So learning to point inside instead of outside will require a lot of practice. Meditate on the great kindness to all beings, So, if we look from many lifetime, then even though we don't remember, but each and every sentient being has been our most caring, loving, kind mother as a human being, as an animal, and from all different realms. Especially when we take the birth as in the womb and egg. So, and then everyone has been our most kind, loving parent, siblings, friends. Not only one time, many, many times. So, by reflecting on the kindness, in that way, and then, the very reason we are still alive, the very reason that we are very alive is due to the kindness of so many beings in the world. If there was no one to help us when we were growing up, especially when we were very vulnerable, we would not be alive. Whether it's a human being or there is most of the animals, if the parents are not watching the baby, another animal will come and eat them, they will not be alive. Same in human beings, if our parent, someone is not watching on us, because we don't know what is harmful and what is helpful when we're young. We didn't know what is fire, what is electricity, what is knife, all of that. What is stone, we might just swallow it, all of that. We don't know what is cliff, we might just fall, trying to, crawl. We might not know what is the big, you put the things, closet, it might fall down by pulling it. There are all those possibilities, because we don't know anything. And constantly need to be watched. Someone. Constant. All the time. If it wasn't for them, then we would have injured ourselves, we would have died ourselves by now. We're still alive, it's because in those most vulnerable, there was someone watching us, taking care of us. When we didn't know how to eat, walk, how to speak, there was people, our own parent, our relative, friends, others who have helped us. So then we learn to walk, we learn to speak. Then throughout our education, so many people involved in our growth, our our understanding, educations. So many people involved, their kindness, their contributions. Without that, we would not have all the education, whatever we have education so far. It's not just one person, so many beings. And to our survival, for our comfort, we need clothing, food, shelter. All of them comes by depending on so many beings, so many other beings. Kindness of them. Because we cannot build our own, we are unable to do everything by ourselves. We don't sew our own clothes. We don't grow our own food. Even we build the house, but still all the things that we need to build, again, it is by others that we buy and then. So if you look from that, everything comes from so many others' contribution, kindness. Whatever we are making, to survive, we need a job, someone to pay us, and again, for the job, people who give us job, people who provide us with a job, and the people who contribute for that, so that there is a job, business. And so all of them contribute in so many different ways. Without all of them, we wouldn't have job. Without the job, we wouldn't be able to pay. Everything that we use in our life to make our life more convenient, all comes through the contributions from others. So all our comfort and happiness that we experience in this life, it all comes through certain contribution, kindness, support of others. And then if we took from a spiritual point of view, without other sentient beings, there is no object to cultivate loving kindness and compassion. Without loving kindness and compassion, then there is no way to engage in the Bodhisattva path, into the Bodhisattva path. Without loving kindness and compassion, there is no bodhicitta. Without bodhicitta, then there is no way to enter the path. So it is dependent on the other sentient beings to be able to enter the sentient being on the path. While on the path, we need to engage in the practice of such as six perfection, the practice of generosity, moral discipline, patience, joyous effort, concentration, wisdom, and so forth. Again, in order to practice all of that, again, we need other sentient beings. Without other sentient beings, there is no object of practicing generosity. Without other sentient beings, there is no object of to practice moral discipline, which is refraining from harming others. Without other sentient beings, there is no object to practice the patience, so forth. So, without other sentient beings, we cannot progress on the path. Throughout the path, 10 bhumis. And without sentient beings, we would not be able, through that, we would not be able to achieve the fully enlightenment. And without sentient beings, even you becoming enlightenment, you would not be able to engage in the enlightened activities if there is no sentient beings. Even the very functioning of fully enlightenment also depend on the sentient beings. the spontaneous, activities of the fully enlightenment also depend on the sentient beings. If there is no sentient beings, then there is no way that of those activities. And so then sentient beings become very necessary, important at the very beginning, in the middle, at the end, in your spiritual path. Through that, then we try to meditate and contemplate on kindness of all sentient beings from many different levels. The more you reflect, contemplate on kindness of them, the more you feel their kindness, the more you feel connected with them, the more you feel close with them. The more you feel connected and close with them, the more it is easy to have loving kindness, compassion, and the bodhicitta mind. And when you feel, that kind of strongly, when you feel kindness of other sentient beings, when you feel through that, when you feel connected with them, close with them, then we wouldn't feel so lonely, the suffering, the pain of feeling loneliness. When you don't feel kindness of someone, when you don't feel connected with anyone, when you don't feel close with anyone, then even you are surrounded by billions of people, you feel lonely. Isn't it? If you go to New York, so many people everywhere, but so many people feel very lonely. Even though everywhere you go, there is so many people, but people feel so lonely because they cannot feel sense of love, kindness of someone. They cannot feel connection with others, close with others. So therefore, despite physically being with so many people, mentally, internally, you feel disconnected with the rest of the world. And so you feel very lonely. On the other hand, if you inside, from internally, if you feel very connected, close, then you can be in isolated places, there's no one, but you wouldn't feel lonely. Physically, you are very isolated. Physically, you are very disconnected from the rest of the world, but emotionally, mentally, you are connected. You feel connected, you feel close with them, and therefore you never feel lonely. And this is feeling of loneliness, one of the big problems nowadays, seems like, unfortunately. And when you have feeling of more close, dear, kindness, you feel more trusting in others. You feel more secure around them. When you feel disconnected with the people around you, when you feel disconnected with them, when you don't feel closeness, dearness, then you don't feel so safe, secure around them. So again, you experience suffering on that level. Emotionally level, you always feel suspicious. You always feel suspicious of people there. around you, suspicious, distrust. So again, you experience pain and suffering in that level. Hmm? And then that is the problem. Another problem is when we don't trust others, when we don't have confidence in someone, we don't trust others, then we are unable to accept others' help when we need help. When we need help and someone is willing to give help, but we are unable to accept the help because we don't trust them. Or we are unable to ask for help when we need them because, again, of distrust. The more trust you have with them, the more you will be able to ask for that. The more you will be willing to ask for that when you need it. And all, so basically, so the more you meditate, reflect on that, the more you feel kindness. So then that open possibly to so many others positive emotions, feelings, and growth of many positive realizations. And when you really feel kindness of someone, and connection with that because of that closeness, even when you have some disagreement, different views on different things, will not be so, so easily bothered by that. You can just kind of let it go. Do you get it? On the other hand, if you don't feel that, then it is difficult to let it go. Especially, let's say, there is someone you dislike very much. It's very difficult for us to let it go if that person make a mistake. Do you get it? Someone you dislike, if that person makes some mistake, it's very difficult for us to let it go. But someone you feel very strong connections, dear, strong, close, even they make mistake, sometimes we can say, okay, this is one mistake. It's easy to let it go and not be so strongly bothered by that, upset you. You know it is a mistake, but it's more easy to kind of let it go. So then when you are able to let it go, then you experience less pain and suffering. The more you are unable to let it go, the more you hold on your mind, the longer you hold, the more you experience the suffering or pain of letting it go. And then next, the practice of combination of giving and taking. And so here it is explaining the practice of the meditation on Tonglen, taking and giving. And the practice of Tonglen, or taking and giving, is to help us to develop more love and compassion. So here when we say taking and giving, then we are talking about in our meditation in practice, taking the suffering and pain and the cause of suffering on ourselves, and giving our own positive and virtues, all the positive qualities and virtues towards others. And the reason to do that meditation practice is to cultivate and develop and increase our sense of loving kindness and compassion. And if we do that practice in the relations with the breathing, then the practice become more powerful. So therefore, giving and taking should be practiced alternately. Okay, I think. So alternately, you take and you give, you take and you give, you take and you give. That is how alternately you do that. And then in terms of from where to start, for some people, they wouldn't have any problem with starting from someone else, someone very dear and close in their life, who might be experiencing some problem, suffering and pain, and reflect and contemplate on their problem, their suffering, their pain, and to be able to relate with that problem, suffering and that, and to be able to feel it as though it is your own pain, your suffering. For example, parents love and compassion with their children, loving. When they see their children suffering, they feel it is their own suffering, unbearable as it is their own personal suffering. Similarly, that we can feel with others in our life, where you feel it's almost like your own suffering, almost like it's no difference, unbearable. And then when you have that strong wish, feeling, then the wish to free them from suffering and cause of the suffering. And when you develop that and wish to free them from suffering and cause suffering by yourself, that is the love. The mind which wish the others to be free from suffering and cause of suffering, and the wish to free them from suffering and cause of suffering by yourself. That is and loving kindness is the almost like the other side of the coin, is the wish to see them happiness, wish to see them happy, and to have cause of happiness. So if they have problem, to the wish to see them, the solutions, fix the problems, and happy. If someone is having a health issue, the wish to see them have a good health, the happiness of good health. If someone has problem with the suffering of relationship, the wish to see them to have good relationship and happiness that come from that. If they have a problem with the job, finance, the wish to see them to be free from those suffering and pain, and then the wish to see them in a good state of their job, finance, and the happiness that comes. So that is so loving kindness and compassion is that. And so in terms of taking that, but for some, it would be, they find difficult to start with someone. And so then for them, they can start with themselves, first starting. So first starting with your own, taking on your own suffering. So in that way, then cultivating love and compassion for yourself first. Cultivating love and compassion for yourself first, and then on the basis of that, then you also cultivate loving kindness, compassion, someone who is more dear in your life, and then expand that to someone who is neutral in your life, and slowly expand it to someone whom you have conflict. And then slowly you expand to all sentient beings. So again, it is a very specific technique of meditations. Even though we would like to have love and compassion to all sentient beings from the very beginning, the way our mind works, it doesn't come immediately like that, starting with specific objects, starting with that one which is more easier. But it seems, for some people, they struggle to have compassion for them than someone else. If that is the case, then first they develop compassion for where they can easily develop, and then try to apply that same to yourself. But for some, at most, it will be more easy to have love and compassion for yourself. Then you can start with that. So that starting point, starting with yourself, it can be for some individuals, but for the certain individual, it can be someone else starting point. And then to you, you will struggle to have loving kindness, compassion on you. And just as the same reason that you are able to develop love and compassion on someone, it's same you think, that you yourself is also the object of love and compassion. You yourself is sentient beings. You yourself is sentient beings which do not wish to be suffering and wish happiness. And just like others, you also struggles. And so therefore, just as they need love and compassion, equally you need love and compassion, which is on the same basis. So then you can try to. And so in terms of taking your own suffering, then you can think, whatever suffering, for example, we are going through, we might have suffering because of our physical situation. We might have suffering because of our certain problem in our relationship, in our job, with our different, whatever we are suffering, you can think of those suffering. If it helps, you can visualize yourself in front of you, two of you, one yourself here, the one there. And then trying to feel the pain and suffering of the one who is in front of you, whatever suffering that you are going through. Trying to really feel that pain and suffering, and cultivate a strong wish to free from that suffering and cause of that suffering. And then when you really feel that pain of suffering or yourself in that, then strong wish to free from that. And then as you breathe in, then you can visualize taking all that suffering in the form of dark, heavy darkness. And then with the breath, it goes through your nostril and through your heart. You can visualize a small black spot which represents selfish attitude, destroying that and transforming that selfish attitude into loving kindness, compassion. And then you feel with loving kindness, compassion. So you can do that, and when you do that, you actually really try to feel strongly that you actually really has taken that pain and suffering. So that is where it says those two should be made to ride on the breath. So if you use the breathing as you inhale and exhale as tools of thinking, when you breathe in, visualizing and thinking, imagining all the sufferings, bringing in yourself, receiving it, and when you breathe out, you visualize all your positive, your wealth, your life, your virtues, all the positive quality that you have in the form of white light. As you breathe out, and breathing out whatever they need, their needs are fulfilled, happiness, and thereby they receive happiness. And so therefore you keep on doing that. So you start with yourself, and then in your suffering, you can think of immediate suffering that one might be experiencing, the future sufferings, even though it is not experiencing, the potential is there, and also taking all the suffering of the futures and the cause, the karma, the delusions that produce such suffering in the future, present and future suffering. You can think and visualize taking all that sufferings, and then you can also think and visualize taking even the subtle obscurations that obscure from us, from actualizing our greatest potentials. And then when you give and when you send all your positive, you can visualize and think, giving them immediate happiness, giving them the happiness of and the cause of happiness, and then leading them to a happiness of higher rebirth, and the causes that lead to a happiness of higher rebirth, the happiness of liberations, the causes that lead to higher liberations, such as the practice of the 3 higher trainings, and then you can visualize leading them to giving them and sending them the happiness of fully enlightenment, and the path, the causes that lead to that, such as path, 10 booming, the practice of 6 perfections. So then you can, when you want to do more detail, you can do that. So you start with yourself, then you extend to someone who is very close, dear in your life, and then stranger, neutral person, and then someone you have more difficulties. And then after that, then you can expand to all sentient beings. And so that is the practice of Tonglen, taking and giving. So again, sometimes in terms of where to start, we can change. It doesn't have to be fixed. One of the beauty I always says, one of the beauty of the Buddha's teaching and the practice is nothing is so rigid and fixed. Buddha has always taught the different teaching, different technique, different method according to the need of different individuals. He never forced, this is the meditation technique method that works for everyone. Certain technique, certain meditation, certain method works better for certain individuals. Is more effective to certain individuals, and another method is more effective and stronger for another beings. And so we have to find ourselves which method is the most effective to us, and according to that we try to follow that particular meditation, that particular method that works for us better. And so, and also sometimes with ourselves, sometimes certain method seems to work better at a certain time. After some time you get bored. Same technique, some meditations, and then you don't have the same feeling. Do you get it? Maybe at the very beginning of a certain practice meditation, you use certain technique, certain meditation, and there is some kind of inspiration and there is some kind of feeling. Then after some time you do that, sometimes maybe you don't feel so much. Maybe then in that sense you might change the technique a little bit. And maybe that might give you another more, some kind of boost, inspirations. And so either we can start with yourself, as it says, with yourself or someone who is dear in your life, and then expand to others. Or sometimes we can start the practice of taking and giving meditation by thinking of someone who is most vulnerable that we can see in the world. Sometime in sometime in the those wars and that you see innocent children's exposed, And when you see that image, whether you see the picture, whether you see in the news, whatever, naturally you feel for that. You feel for their pain, their sufferings. So you can use something like that, which is more easy to develop the love, compassion, and do the taking and giving. Starting point. It can be many different, so you can start with something like that. Or sometime on the way you saw something, or you saw in TV, again, maybe you saw animals, protectless and being kind of in a very painful, and where your heart just go for them, and that's love and compassion so easy, and so then again something like that you can use that at the first beginning of the beginning point of that sometime. Sometimes you can use with the 6 rams, using from the most, where there is the most pain, to a little bit less suffering, from very intense suffering to less intense sufferings of different realms of sentient beings. So the starting point can be changed sometime. Again, of course, to individually, sometimes certain people connect with particular certain things, and also with one individual, sometimes we connect with something more than others at certain times. So we don't have to be so rigid and fixed. Sometimes we can change those. And that is same with all the meditations, all the meditations. And again, in terms of taking, again, as I mentioned, we can think of particular immediate pain and suffering, and then we take of that suffering. And then in terms of taking, then we take all the other sufferings and the cause of suffering, all the karma, all the delusions. Then all the obscuration. So when we want to go in kind of more detail in that, we can do that. And this practice of taking and giving can be a very powerful practice. A lot of people have found very powerful. I have met many people, Buddhists, non-Buddhists, even non-Buddhists, who were introduced by this practice, and they were kind of touched by this practice, and they started doing practice, and it helped them a lot. I have a friend in New Mexico, in Santa Fe. She said she wasn't a Buddhist, but she met some Tibetan monks, when they came to do some Saint mandala, and so she somehow, and her daughter kind of, when she was young, got kind of connected with them. And she was going through a lot of difficulties in her life. She divorced, and it was nicely divorced. So a lot of suffering, pain going, everyone's involved there. And so she shared her pain, sufferings, and asked for some guidance or help. And then one of the senior monks kind of taught her to do this practice of tonglen and taking. So she said she started doing that. And slowly, at the very beginning, she had a lot of negative feelings, a lot of feeling for her ex-husband, and a lot of, anger, a lot of resentment, a lot of bad feelings. So she started doing that practice, trying to see, she's not only one who is experienced the pain, he's also experienced the suffering and pain as well, Both are experiencing the suffering and the pain of the whole process. And so with that understanding a little bit of understanding on that, she started to do the practice of taking and giving. Then over the time, then her mind started to change, her attitude started to change. And so then she started to have less of hard feeling and negative feelings, less intense. And slowly, she started to feel better. And then because of that, their communication also improved. Because when you have that kind of hard feeling, our communication cannot, we have a difficulty with communicating it properly. Because there is so much anger, there is so much resentment, there is so much bad feeling towards each other. So people cannot communicate, and they cannot think properly for their own bigger pictures. And so her mind being more calm and peaceful because of not having those bad feeling, she was able to communicate better with more. And so their communication started to become better. And then it turned out they had a good relationship. I mean, they are not together, but they don't have. And especially it was great for the child. The child doesn't have to suffer because of their divorce, because there was less conflict between the two parents, because there was less fighting, conflict between two parents. The children doesn't have to be thrown in between. And because of that, so that's her experience. She found that. And I have also heard others who are other students who have found similar experience after they start doing that practice. I have one friend in Sweden, who started doing that practice with someone. He has difficulty at the job, workplace. He has difficulty with that, and he started doing that practice. And slowly, his attitude changed, his mind changed. He didn't have any bad feeling anymore. So he had to find someone else, the object. And so that is wonderful. It's wonderful, when your mind is disturbed by such a negativity, so much anger, hatred, negativity, evil feelings, and all of that. Through practice, when your mind is able to calm, quiet, and start to feel better, even though maybe, even though you don't agree with things, but still you don't need to have the hard feeling, We can still disagree, we can still have our own path, different thinking, different ways, but without having a bad feeling with each other. And that is what is all needed. And I think even in this country, that's where it is needed. There can be a totally different views on how to run the countries. That is not the big issue, as long as there is no bad feeling towards each other. If there is not bad feeling towards each other, even with those different views, different policy, we can always find common ground. Because we start to think for the bigger pictures. But when we start to have bad feeling, then everything becomes an excuse to attack someone. And then things become worse and worse. And that is on our individual, on one-to-one person, or as a country, as a world. And then And it is said, this the practice of Tonglen is very powerful practice to cultivate and to develop loving kindness and compassion. Very, very powerful. When you really, really started to feel that, not just kind of visualizing, imagine, but while you are imagining, visualizing, but when you really feel like you are taking on pain or suffering, and when you really feel like you are giving, sending all your virtues, all the positive, when you really feel from your heart, then definitely something changes in your mind, and you become more soft. Your heart becomes more soft. From that softness, then your love, compassion easily develop. So I think at the moment I will kind of stop here. Maybe if there's question, I can take one or two. I wasn't sure. I wasn't so sure. What I guess I was supposed to have a break in between. I guess because it was 2 hours. So any questions so far? Any questions? No questions? Great. Yes, please.
Geshe, can you go over again that part when you say when we start we do using Tonglen and we start with ourselves, and then you said you look at your own suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you do that? Like you look at your own suffering, you take your own suffering.
Yes.
And then
So it will be helpful, I think, to do that, because it is hard to think of doing that, taking on your own suffering in that way. Because here we use some kind of imagination, visualizations when you do that Tonglen, taking and giving. So it might be more helpful if you visualize yourself, one in front of you, okay? One yourself, like looking in a mirror, in front of you there, and then you think, reflect on the suffering that you are going through that. And then you can take on that suffering, whatever suffering that you are going through, and then wishing them all the happiness and sending them the happiness, wishing them free from all the suffering, wishing them all the happiness, giving them happiness, so that you can, if you do that, then it can be more effective using that visualization in the same way that you use for others. So first you start with yourself in that way. Even though I didn't see any text anywhere using that image like that, even though it says that first you start with your suffering, but I personally find helpful if you do that way, like yourself, creating yourself like a image of you there in front, and then taking the suffering on, thinking and thinking that way. That seems to be more helpful. Yes. Okay.
So, for related to that, how do you prevent yourself from like making that like a self pity, like you start self pitying yourself? When you think of your own suffering, how do you prevent not falling into self pity?
When you think of your own suffering, you mean? Mm-hmm. Just like, when we try to cultivate loving kindness, compassion to others, we use the same kind of reasoning and logic when we are trying to develop loving kindness, compassion for yourself. So again, if we have certain other kind of foundations of understanding, that can help, that can help. So one way of understanding, is that the suffering are not permanent; they are impermanent, and suffering are temporary. Just like everything's, they can be overcome. They do not last forever. When you have that kind of a little bit of that understanding, it helps. Whether it's for yourself, either it's for others. And that kind of understanding, the impermanent nature of the suffering itself, and also to see, even though we might have our own suffering, we might have our own faults, all those different weakness, shortcomings, but on the foundational level, on the fundamental level, that we have Buddha nature, and we have by nature it's altruistic. So having that understanding also help, whether we are trying to develop compassion for ourselves and for others, to have that that foundations, so that we don't feel so bad about oneself or so bad about others. Saying on fundamental level, there is that Buddha nature, altruistic nature, and due to certain cause conditions, then our own certain mistakes, certain shortcoming are produced. So with that, so having those foundations can be helpful to have the compassion. That suffering can be overcome. So having those can be helpful. And then understanding, it is not only you who is suffering, there are so many other beings who are suffering just like yourself. And there are other beings who are even suffering even much more worse than ourselves. So I think those different understanding and bringing those understanding can help us to be not be self-pity. So does that make sense? Did that help or make sense? Yeah. Yes.
Geshe, you talked also last night about, and you said it today I think too, it could be short, long, medium, like it's up to us, but what is a good amount of shortness?
1 second. Short, I would say 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes will be to have some tangible, and to be able to feel a little bit, you need to have at least like 10 minutes, Less than that, then we just go the process and can't really feel it. In our meditations, whatever we are using different concept or outline or reasoning or example, whatever. We use that to lead to some kind of feeling, and to feel it, sometimes it requires a little bit of time. You can't just rush it. And so 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes would be the kind of short, when I say short, yeah.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah. So then we have a lunch break, and then we meet at 2:30. Yeah. No, at 2. Sorry, at 2. Yeah.